Mister, please take my mama as your wife. She's everything I've got left, the child murmured to the quiet cowboy. Winter of 1879. The Colorado frontier disappeared beneath a merciless tempest, the sort that devoured all noise and transformed the landscape into a treacherous blanket of white silence. Snow cut through the evergreens like razor blades, while the gale screamed through the woodland like a wounded beast. Silas Boone pulled his jacket closer and hunched forward in his saddle, his mount laboring through the deep drifts. He was a man shaped by solitude, 40 years weathered by elements, alcohol, and battle. Yet even he couldn't dismiss what he believed he detected. A noise, faint, distinctly human. He halted his horse and strained to listen. The sound came again, a wail. Without pause, he steered his animal toward the cry, navigating between snow-laden branches. The voice guided him to a toppled tree trunk. Sheltered behind it, huddled like a frightened animal in two threadbare covers, lay a small child. Her complexion was ashen, her mouth tinged blue, trembling like a twig in a gale. Silas dismounted and crouched low, speaking with quiet authority. "Child, where's your mother?" The girl's jaw chattered, her frightened gaze fixed on his face. "Don't harm her, please," she breathed. "She didn't intend to flee." Silas felt his throat constrict. "Nobody will hurt anyone," he assured her gently, removing his thick woolen cape. "Let's warm you first." He enveloped her carefully, her frail form nearly weightless in his embrace. The instant warmth touched her skin, she whimpered, then gripped his shirt with unexpected force. "What do they call you?" he asked, lifting her onto his saddle. "Emma," she replied, voice muffled against his chest. "I'm Emma." "Very well, Emma. Let's escape this storm." He mounted behind her, adjusting the cloak tighter, and directed the horse toward the hunting lodge that had served as his dwelling for 6 harsh winters. His weathered, steady hands had never faltered. Tonight they nearly did. When they arrived at the lodge, the flames had died, and frost had invaded every corner. Silas placed her on the bed, removed her soaked footwear, and lit the lamp with unsteady fingers. She remained silent, simply staring at the fire as though she'd forgotten what illumination looked like. Silas prepared tea from pine bark and honey, offering it with careful hands. She drank slowly. "Do you have a mother, Emma?" She nodded. "Mama, Amelia." "Where might she be?" Emma gazed downward. "She told me if trouble came, I should hide, that she'd come find me." Silas rose deliberately, moving to the entrance. The tempest continued raging, but his instincts suggested this woman wasn't distant. Someone had carried this child through these woods. Someone desperate. He donned his coat and followed the trail, barely discernible in the snow. Tiny boot marks, stumbling, weaving between trees. He moved swiftly, ignoring his body's protests. Then he spotted her. Near a rocky ledge, half buried by snow and pressed against a pine, was a woman. Her skin was flushed with cold, lips cracked and blue. Her gown was ripped, one arm hanging useless. Her eyes opened when he knelt beside her, but barely. "Don't," she gasped. "Please." "I'm not here to harm you," Silas said quietly. "Is she safe?" "Emma's warm and waiting by the fire." At that, her entire body shuddered with relief, and she began to weep. Not loudly, not wildly, just soft, broken sounds that barely escaped her lips. Silas remained silent. He lifted her gently, as he had the child, and carried her back through the storm. Behind him, the wind whispered through the trees, as if witnessing something sacred, something about endurance and new beginnings. Dawn arrived slowly and gray, stretching pale fingers of light across the frost-covered windows of the cabin. Inside, stillness lingered, broken only by the soft crackling of fire and the gentle rhythm of breathing. Amelia Rose lay beneath heavy wool blankets, her face bruised and lips split, but the fever had subsided. Her daughter Emma curled against her side like a shadow, refusing separation. Silas Boone stood near the fireplace, pouring hot water over dried mint and pine needles. His hands moved with practiced precision, but his eyes seldom left the woman on his cot, Amelia Rose. He'd heard that name before, not from newspapers, but from the lips of travelers and whiskey-soaked merchants, men who spoke her name like venom and swore she was a ruthless killer. They claimed she shot her husband in the chest after dinner and escaped with the child. Said she fled before justice could prevail. But the woman in his bed was no monster. Her arms held that little girl as if they were made to shield her. Her body showed signs of survival, not cruelty. Silas approached the table, sat down slowly, and waited. An hour passed before Amelia stirred. She awakened with a gasp, fingers clutching the blanket tightly before her eyes found Emma and softened. Then she looked up and froze. "You remained," she whispered. Silas nodded. "You required care. Emma needed warmth." Amelia attempted to sit up. Her breath caught as pain flared in her side. "You fractured a rib," he said, and nearly froze to death. Amelia swallowed hard, her voice hoarse. "You should have abandoned me." Silas raised an eyebrow. "I don't make a practice of leaving people to perish, even ones whose stories don't align." Her jaw tightened. "What have you heard?" "Enough to know your name. Enough to know folks back in Esville claim you murdered your husband and fled." Her voice broke, low and raw. "They never asked why. They never questioned what he did to me. They simply saw him bleeding and me holding Emma and decided I was guilty." Silas said nothing. He reached for the tin cup and poured her some hot mint tea. She accepted it with trembling hands. "He used to beat me," she whispered, staring into the steam. "Mostly where it wouldn't show. He'd drink, then turn vicious. The night it happened, I thought he was going to kill me. Emma was screaming. I grabbed the pistol. I didn't even mean to pull the trigger. I just wanted him to stop." She sipped the tea, hands tight around the metal. "There wasn't going to be a trial. His brother runs the sheriff's office. They were going to hang me by morning. I had to run." Silas leaned back, eyes shadowed. "You chose the hardest path you could. It was either run or let Emma watch them take me away in chains. She's all I have." Outside, wind howled across the trees. Inside, the silence between them thickened. Silas stared at the fire, the tea untouched in his own cup. Amelia lay back down, exhaustion pressing into her bones. "I'll leave as soon as I can walk," she murmured. "I know what harboring a fugitive can cost a man." Silas didn't answer. He just kept watching the flames. Later that morning, the aroma of cornmeal and frying bacon roused Emma from sleep. She rubbed her eyes, blinking at the unfamiliar room until she spotted her mother and relaxed. Then she saw Silas by the stove, spoon in hand, humming softly under his breath. She slid off the cot barefoot, tiptoed across the floor, and tugged at the hem of his coat. He looked down. Emma's eyes were wide, solemn. "Please marry my mama, mister," she whispered. "She's all I have now." Silas froze, the spoon still in his hand. He knelt slowly, meeting her gaze. And in that instant, something inside the silent rancher shifted, something he hadn't allowed to move in years. He didn't answer, but he placed his hand gently on her head and continued stirring the pot. Twilight settled like a bruise across the Colorado pines. The fire inside Silas Boone's cabin cast long shadows across rough-hewn walls, and silence, thick and complex, filled the space between the three souls gathered there. Amelia Rose sat on the cot, her wound freshly bandaged, watching the quiet cowboy move with care that bordered on reverence. He spoke little, as always, but his actions told stories. He'd split extra kindling and stacked it neatly beside the stove. He'd cleaned Emma's muddy boots and left them drying near the fire. And now, as the wind clawed again at the shutters, Silas rose from his crouch and crossed the room to the warped window frame. Without a word, he hammered a fresh slat of pine across the gap, sealing out the cold. Amelia watched him, brow furrowed with something more than caution, something like guilt. "You don't have to do all this," she said softly. Silas didn't glance back. "Storm's not finished. Roof leaks in 2 spots. That window's the worst of it." He paused. "Ain't right for a child to sleep cold." She nodded slowly, her hand resting on Emma's back. The little girl, wrapped in Silas's spare wool blanket, had curled into sleep not long after supper. She looked safe now, chest rising in slow rhythm, fingers still tangled in the hem of her mother's skirt. Amelia's voice broke the quiet. "You ever have children?" Silas set the hammer down and leaned his shoulder into the frame, testing the seal. "No wife," he shook his head. "Never came close." Amelia hesitated. "Then why help us?" "You don't owe us anything." Silas finally turned to face her. His eyes were clear, steady, but there was a storm behind them that matched the one outside. You remind me of someone. My sister. Amelia blinked. She was sweet, he said. Kind-hearted, married young. Husband beat her badly. Folks said she must have done something to deserve it. That's how they talked back in Kansas. Amelia's lips parted, but no words came. Silas's jaw worked once before he finished, quiet and raw. She died with her second child still inside her, and nobody ever said sorry. The room fell still. Amelia looked down at Emma, her throat tightening. I'm sorry. Silas shrugged, eyes drifting to the fire. It was a long time ago, but I swore if I ever saw it again, if I ever saw a woman cornered like that, I'd do more than watch. Silence stretched between them again, full of unsaid things. Then Amelia's voice, brittle as old paper. I won't be a debt to any man, especially not a kind one. Silas nodded once, as if he'd expected that. I ain't offering a debt, he said. Just a dry roof for a few nights. Nothing more. Her eyes studied him, this man who built fences and repaired windows and said so little it made every word matter more. She wasn't sure what she'd expected from him. Pity, perhaps, or calculation, but he'd shown neither. Instead, there was a kind of reverence in the way he laid down an extra blanket near the fire. He placed a pillow beside it, then reached over to tuck Emma's blanket higher over her shoulders, his fingers pausing gently on the child. He didn't speak, didn't ask permission, just made sure the little girl would be warm through the night. That quiet care chipped at the armor Amelia had been wearing since the day she ran. It felt more dangerous than any threat because it asked for nothing, because it made her want to trust. Later, when Silas settled on the floor across from them, back resting against the wall, arms crossed like he was guarding a line no one had drawn, Amelia whispered into the dark, What do you want from us? His reply came after a long moment. Nothing you haven't already given? She frowned. What's that? He looked at the embers. A reason. Amelia stared at him for a long time, then leaned back against the cot, Emma's warmth beside her. Outside, the wind finally began to calm, and for the first time in months, she felt a part of her breathe. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows along the log walls. Outside, the wind had calmed after the blizzard, leaving the cabin wrapped in a hush so complete it seemed sacred. Inside, Amelia sat at the table, a cold tin cup held between her hands. She was not shivering, but the tension in her shoulders hadn't eased. Silas leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the fire's red coals. He had barely spoken since supper, letting the silence stretch between them. Emma had fallen asleep hours ago, curled into quilts by the hearth, her breathing soft. I should tell you, Amelia said, her voice dry and low. Silas looked over, but said nothing. I was married 5 years, she continued. His name was Harold Shaw. His family owned the feed store in Esville. I was a school teacher. I thought marrying into that kind of name would mean safety. Respect. She glanced down, thumb tracing the seam of the tin cup. The first time he hit me, he brought flowers the next day. Told me it was the liquor talking, that it wouldn't happen again. Silas didn't move. The bruises came next, then the broken ribs. I told folks I fell. Told myself I just wasn't being a good enough wife. Her voice hardened with memory. After Emma was born, it got worse. He'd slam doors, scream. She cried whenever he was near. I tried to leave, went to the sheriff. Her mouth twisted. He said I should be more agreeable, that Harold was respected, and I shouldn't cause trouble. Silas's jaw clenched. Still, he said nothing. Then came the night he raised his hand with Emma watching. I stepped between them. He shoved me. I hit my head. When I came to, he was still coming at me. I grabbed the fire poker. She paused, eyes fixed on the hearth. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to make it stop. There was no pride in her words, no defense, only quiet finality. His family owned the town, she said. They weren't going to let me speak, so I ran. She wiped at her eyes with the heel of her hand. I've been running ever since. She did not expect an answer, but when she looked up, Silas had stepped away from the wall. He crossed the room without a word, reached to the shelf, and brought down a bottle of rye. He poured 2 short glasses, one for himself and one for her. He set it in front of her and sat across the table. She hesitated, then lifted it. Their eyes met. The drink burned, but it steadied her. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why are you helping me?" Silas stared at the fire. "Because I know what it means when no one does." He tilted his head, and in the firelight she saw the pale scar on his temple. "My sister begged for help once," he said. Neighbors turned away. Sheriff said it was domestic. When she died, they blamed her temper. Amelia went still. "I was working up north. By the time I came back, she was already buried. The man who did it walked free." A beat of silence. "I swore on her grave," he said, voice steady, "that if I ever saw someone else in that place, I wouldn't stay quiet." Then he looked at her, not with pity or judgment, but recognition. "I don't care what the law says. Sometimes the law is just a fence made to keep folks like him safe. But I know what's right." The words hung between them like the soft breath of the sleeping child. For the first time in weeks, Amelia exhaled, not from fear, but from something close to hope. In the tiny cabin, with wind curling around the corners and Emma safe in sleep, she allowed herself, just for a moment, to stop running. The frost had barely begun to lift when Silas heard the hoofbeats. 3 riders approaching fast. He stepped outside, boots crunching over the hardened snow as the sun struggled to rise behind gray clouds. His breath misted in the morning air, but the cold was not what made his spine go stiff. It was the sound, tight, practiced, heavy with intent. Not drifters, not neighbors. Bounty men. Inside the cabin, Amelia stirred beside the hearth. Emma was still asleep, her hand clutching the edge of a blanket. Silas didn't look back. He didn't need to. His hand rested at his side, not on his pistol, but near enough. The riders came into view, their coats lined with dust and ambition, horses steaming in the morning chill. One wore a wide-brimmed hat too clean for a traveler. Another chewed a piece of tobacco with the indifference of someone who'd taken lives for less than money. The third held the reins with gloved precision, but it was the paper in his hand that drew Silas's eye. The leader stopped his horse 10 feet from the porch. "Morning," he said, voice slick with civility. "Sorry to bother you at this hour. We're looking for someone." Silas didn't move. "You found me?" The man smiled without warmth. "We ain't after you, friend. Name's Harold Clay. These here are my associates. We've got reason to believe a woman named Amelia Shaw's been spotted in these parts. You wouldn't have seen her, would you?" Silas's jaw worked once, slow and silent. He didn't blink. Clay unfolded the wanted notice, holding it like a badge. "Fugitive escaped justice after murdering her husband in Esville. $500 bounty. Dead or alive, though the sheriff prefers alive." Behind him, the man with the tobacco spit into the snow. "500 for a school marm. That's a new one." Silas stepped forward once, just enough to cast a longer shadow. "She ain't running anymore." The riders exchanged glances. Clay tilted his head. "That a fact?" Silas nodded. "She's under protection now." The third man narrowed his eyes. "Yours?" There was a pause. Silas reached into his coat, not quick, not slow, and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. The ink was still smudged from the night before. He held it up without a word. "What's that?" Clay asked. "A marriage license," Silas said. "Signed and witnessed. Dated yesterday. Name reads Amelia Boone. Now she's my wife." Tobacco spit again. "That's supposed to mean something. It means your bounty's void. You'll need a fresh warrant, and you'll need to take it up with me." Clay's jaw ticked. "You willing to die for a murderous woman, Boone?" Silas's voice was quiet, flat. "I've seen better men than me buried by worse women than her. But this one, she's different. She fought to live. You want her? You'll have to come through me." For a moment, the air felt sharp as a drawn blade. The bounty hunters shifted in their saddles. One hand moved toward a holster. Another gripped a rifle slung across their back. Silas didn't reach for his gun. He just stood there, solid, unmoving, as though the earth itself had decided to rise in her defense. Inside the cabin, the door creaked. Amelia's face appeared in the shadows behind him, eyes wide, mouth forming his name. But Silas didn't move, didn't turn. He said it again, slower. "She's my wife now." Clay looked past him, saw the figure in the doorway, the mother, the woman, the child stirring in blankets. He spat in the snow. "Well," he muttered, "ain't this a damn storybook?" He crumpled the wanted paper and shoved it into his coat. "This ain't over," he said. "You bought yourself time, Boone. That's all." "Time's enough," Silas said. The horses turned. The bounty hunters rode out the same way they came, leaving only the churned-up snow behind them, in a silence so thick it hurt the ears. Only then did Silas breathe. He turned. Amelia was standing barefoot, one hand gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "You lied for me," she whispered. "No," Silas said. "I told them the truth." She looked down at the folded license still in his hand. "That ain't real." "It could be," he said, "if you want it to be." Her voice broke. "Why would you risk everything?" He glanced back at the trail the riders left, then to the doorway where Emma now stood, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Because some folks deserve a second chance, and some little girls shouldn't grow up afraid every time they hear a knock." Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a click that sounded somehow like a vow. The morning sun barely touched the frost outside when Amelia found the letter. It lay on the corner of Silas's work table, weighted down with a tin cup. The envelope was open, but the letter inside was unmistakably recent, ink not yet faded, the handwriting deliberate and firm. She read the salutation, "To Mr. Granger McKee, attorney at law, Esterville." Her chest tightened. As her eyes scanned the lines, her breath caught. Silas had written a full account, not just of the events that led to the death of her husband, but of Amelia's wounds, her bruises, her flight, her fears. He described the bruising on her wrists and jaw the night he found her. He mentioned the old scars on her back. He had included every word she had said by the fire that night when she thought she was only speaking to silence. And at the bottom, Silas Boone had signed his name. She stormed outside. He was splitting firewood, sleeves rolled, steam rising from his shoulders as the morning chill met sweat. The axe fell with steady rhythm, his movements controlled. "You sent it," she said. He did not look up. "I did. To a lawyer in Esterville, without asking." He paused, set the axe down, and turned. "I figured it was time someone spoke for you." She held up the letter. "This could stir everything back up. You could be dragged into something that's not your burden." "Maybe it is now." "Why would you risk your name for someone like me?" Silas wiped his hands on a rag, then looked at her. Really looked. "Because you're not someone like anyone." Her mouth opened, but the words faltered. Behind them, the cabin door creaked. Emma stepped into the light, wrapped in a blanket too big for her small frame. Her hair was mussed with sleep, and her cheeks were flushed from warmth. She rubbed her eyes, walked straight to Silas, and pressed her hand into his. "He's the only man who ever made Mama smile again," she said. Amelia went still. Silas looked down at the child. "You cold, Button?" Emma nodded. He scooped her up and draped his coat over her shoulders before passing her gently to Amelia. The gesture made Amelia's heart twist. They stood there for a moment, three souls bound by accident, timing, and something that felt dangerously close to family. Amelia swallowed hard. She looked at him, her voice quiet. "Would you do it for real?" Silas's brow furrowed slightly. "Do what?" She took a breath. "Marry me. Not for show, not to fool bounty hunters, but for her." Silas stared at her for a long, silent stretch. Only the wind moved, rustling pine needles, lifting hair from Amelia's forehead. Then he stepped forward, closing the space between them. He touched Emma's small hand where it rested on her mother's shoulder. "Not just for her," he said softly, "for all three of us." Amelia blinked, tears rising fast and unbidden. "You don't even know what you're promising." "I know this," he said, voice steady. "That little girl thinks I hung the moon. And you look at me like you're waiting for me to vanish. But I'm still here." He touched her arm gently. "I'm not offering rescue. I'm offering a life. Hard, honest, and maybe a little quieter than you're used to. But it's yours if you want it." Amelia could not speak. Emma leaned her head on her mother's chest, already dozing again. Silas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded square of paper. It was the same marriage license he had shown the bounty hunters, but now at the bottom a new line had been added. Awaiting consent of bride, it read. He held it out. Amelia looked down at it, then at him, and then for the first time in years she smiled. Not out of fear or pretense or politeness, but something deep and trembling and real. I'll think about it, she said. Silas nodded. I'll be here, he answered, for both your answers, however long they take. The snow had melted weeks ago, and with spring came color. Green blades poking through damp earth, the sound of birds returning, the creak of thawed trees stretching into sunlight. But not all things that return bring warmth. Silas and Amelia were stacking kindling behind the cabin when they heard the hoofbeats. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Emma looked up from her drawing near the porch and went still. A figure emerged at the tree line, tall and broad, astride a chestnut stallion that looked half mad from the ride. Amelia froze. Her hand gripped Silas's arm before her mind caught up to her body. I know that horse, she whispered. The rider pulled his reins just short of the clearing, letting the silence do the talking. He dismounted with practiced ease, boots crunching against damp ground. His hat was pulled low, shadowing a face carved in anger and years of sun. The resemblance hit Amelia like a slap. Elias? Her voice was flat, cold. Silas stepped slightly in front of her, his hand moving near the grip of his revolver. Friend of yours? Brother-in-law, she said. His brother is the one I buried. Elias Whitmore removed his gloves slowly, theatrically, like a man used to owning every room he entered. You made a mess, Amelia, he said. Ran off in the night like a coward. Dragged your bastard child through God's wild earth. And for what? To hide in a shack with a hired hand? Silas's jaw tightened. Amelia took a step forward, brushing past Silas. You know what your brother did to me? You saw it. I saw a wife who didn't know her place, Elias snapped, and I see a woman playing house with a rancher who doesn't know better. Silas moved then, calmly, deliberately. He stepped down from the porch and into the grass, stopping just a foot from Elias. You've said enough, he said. Elias smirked. This ain't your fight, Boone. Silas met his eyes, steady as a mountain. It is now. And then Elias swung. It was fast, brutal. His fist connected with Silas's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Silas recovered quickly, striking back with the force of a man who had fought before, and fought to protect. They grappled in the mud, punches landing with sickening thuds. Elias fought dirty, grabbing, clawing, using weight to his advantage. Silas fought smart, targeting the ribs, ducking low, conserving strength. But age and fury made Elias a dangerous man. Amelia screamed as Silas took a blow to the ribs that sent him crumpling to the ground. Blood smeared his cheek. Elias loomed over him, panting. That all you got, cowboy? He raised his boot. Then, no! A small voice cried out. Emma ran from the porch, legs pumping, her little arms stretched wide as she threw herself between the two men. You leave my papa alone. Elias froze. Silas blinked through pain, trying to rise. Emma, go back! But she stood firm, trembling, but defiant, her arms shaking like branches in wind. You're bad, she said to Elias. Mama cried every night because of you. Papa makes her laugh. Amelia moved fast, grabbing her daughter and pulling her back. Elias looked at the little girl. Something flickered, uncertainty maybe, or shame, but only for a breath. You think this makes him your father? He sneered. You can't wipe away blood with a name. No, Amelia said sharply, but you can build something better with it. She stepped beside Silas, who had risen to one knee, breathing hard. He's not your blood, Elias growled. No, Amelia said. Thank God. Silas stood, swaying slightly but upright. You want to bring her back? Do it the lawful way. You got proof? Warrants? You press charges in court? Elias spat in the mud. The court don't care. Then you have no claim here, Silas said. And if you touch her again, I swear I'll bury you so deep not even the buzzards will bother. Elias stared. Then slowly he backed away, mounted his horse. His final glare cut through the clearing like a whip. This ain't over. He rode off, dust and tension trailing behind him like smoke from a gun. Amelia dropped to her knees beside Silas, checking his wounds with shaking hands. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "I've been worse." Emma clung to his side, whispering, "I was scared." Silas wrapped an arm around her. "Me too, Button. But you were brave." And Amelia, her heart pounding, her hands blood-streaked and shaking, looked at them both and knew they were hers, no matter who came knocking next. The morning sun slipped gently through the pines as the Esterville clerk handed Silas Boone a sealed envelope. It bore the county's seal. Amelia Rose was cleared. The act had been ruled self-defense. Silas read the letter, his jaw easing as the weight lifted. Behind him, Amelia let out a soft, shaky breath. Emma peeked out from beneath her mother's shawl. The small office felt brighter. Outside, church bells rang. Townspeople paused to listen. Silas tucked the letter into his coat. He turned to Amelia, took her hand gently. "They've cleared you," he said. "You're free, love." Emma smiled wide, holding wild rose blossoms in her little fists. That afternoon they wed in the clearing behind Silas's cabin. It was simple. A pine log served as an altar, draped in saplings and flowers. Their guests were few. Mrs. Keller from the blacksmith shop, old Thomas from the sawmill, and Emma's teacher. Silas stood straight in his best coat. Amelia wore a faded calico dress, neat and clean. Emma carried a small bouquet. As golden light slanted across them, Silas promised without fanfare to stand by them always. Emma looked solemn, then stepped forward and kissed her mother's cheek. She reached for Silas's hand. "Papa," she whispered. Silas knelt and gathered them both into his arms, the three of them beneath tall pines. Wind rustled the branches, carrying birdsong and laughter. Later at the cabin, they celebrated with stew and cornbread, passing tin cups of corn whiskey. Emma ran to Silas and whispered, "Do we have to share him?" He smiled and ruffled her hair. "Never." As twilight settled, Silas grabbed a chisel and a cedar plank. Climbing a ladder to the porch beam, he carved carefully. Amelia and Emma stepped outside to watch. Neighbors fell quiet as they realized what he was doing, etching a name into the wood above their door. Emma Rose Boone. Each letter carried pain, healing, and hope. When he finished, he stepped down, brushing sawdust from his sleeves. "Names on timber," he said softly, "so no wind can take us away." Emma reached up, fingers brushing the letters. Her voice wavered. "You're my real papa now, right?" Silas knelt again, hands cupping her cheeks. "Been waiting to be, little one." Emma giggled and hugged him tight. That night, after the guests had gone and the cabin quieted, Amelia opened her worn journal. Firelight glowed soft against the pages. "I ran from death," she wrote, "but I found life in a man who speaks little but loves loud enough for three." She closed the journal and set it on the mantel beside their rings and Emma's daisies, now pressed in a jar. Silas sat on the hearth bench, Emma curled in his lap, Amelia resting against his shoulder. In the hush, their breaths mingled in the warmth. Outside, the pines whispered. Inside, love held fast. Their roots at last had taken hold. If this story stirred something in your heart, the whisper of pine, the warmth of found family, the silent strength of a man who loved loud without saying much, then you are exactly where you're meant to be. But here, in the rugged beauty of the American frontier, love does not come easy. It comes tested, it comes torn, and it comes true. So if you believe in quiet cowboys, brave women, that's the kind of love we bring you here. Subscribe to Wild West Folks because there's another tale riding in tomorrow. And trust me, you won't want to miss the next flicker of firelight where love rises from dust, danger, and daring hearts. Click that subscribe button and we'll see you back on the trail, where every story burns a little brighter.